Before the sun rose over the plains of Gaugamela, the world held its breath. A cold desert wind moved quietly across the vast Mesopotamian plain. Dust drifted low over the earth that had been deliberately flattened for war. This battlefield was not chosen by chance. Darius III, King of Kings, had prepared this ground carefully. He needed space, wide, open space, for cavalry, for chariots, for overwhelming numbers. And across that open plain stood two armies, two visions of the world. To the east, the might of the Persian Empire, the greatest empire on earth. To the west, a smaller but disciplined Macedonian force led by a 25-year-old conqueror, Alexander. As the first light broke across the horizon, bronze armor began to glow. Spears shimmered. Banners stirred. Some soldiers whispered prayers. Some stared silently into the distance. Some wondered if they would see another sunrise. This was not just another battle. This dawn would decide the fate of empires. As the sun climbed higher, the scale of the Persian army became clear. It stretched beyond sight, a living ocean of soldiers. This was the power of the vast Achaemenid Empire, a realm that spanned from Egypt to Central Asia. Its army was not one people, but many. Medes, Babylonians, Persians, Bactrians, Armenians. Thousands upon thousands stood ready. On the flanks, powerful cavalry units waited, horses restless and armored. In the center, disciplined infantry stood shoulder to shoulder. And at the front, deadly scythed chariots lined up in silent rows. Golden banners snapped in the wind. Royal standards towered above the ranks. High above them all stood Darius III, watching from his chariot. He had the numbers. He had the ground. He had the advantage. To any ordinary commander, the sight would have been terrifying. But Alexander was not ordinary. Then came the machines of terror. Scythed chariots. Light, fast, and deadly. From each wheel extended sharpened blades of steel, designed not just to kill, but to break formations, to shatter courage. As the horses pawed at the ground, their breath steamed in the morning air. Leather straps creaked. Metal glinted in the sunlight. When released, these chariots would thunder forward. Spinning blades slicing at legs, splintering shields, carving chaos into tightly packed infantry. Their purpose was psychological as much as physical. If fear spread, if the Macedonian lines broke, the battle would be over before it truly began. But Alexander had studied this weapon. His soldiers had trained for this moment. Instead of panic, they would create gaps. Instead of retreat, they would strike the horses. Instead of fear, they would hold their ground. The blades that were meant to destroy discipline would soon meet the unbreakable wall of the Macedonian phalanx. High above the battlefield, standing tall upon his royal chariot, was Darius III, King of Kings. His armor gleamed with gold, engraved with symbols of lions and ancient Persian glory. A jeweled crown rested upon his head. Behind him stood generations of empire, the legacy of Cyrus, Xerxes, and countless rulers before him. From his elevated platform, Darius could see it all. An army vast beyond measure. Cavalry stretching across the plains. Infantry forming dense, colorful ranks. Scythed chariots poised at the front. This was the might of the Persian Empire, the superpower of the ancient world. He had chosen this ground carefully. Flattened it. Prepared it. Calculated every advantage. And somewhere across that field stood a young Macedonian king who dared to challenge him. Darius believed numbers would crush ambition. That scale would defeat courage. But as he scanned the horizon, perhaps, deep within, he wondered, was this truly enough to stop Alexander? On the opposite side of the field, there was no golden display. No towering chariots. No endless horizon of men. The Macedonian camp was smaller. Controlled. Silent. Soldiers adjusted bronze helmets. Strapped leather armor tighter. Lifted long sarissa spears, weapons nearly twice their height. There were no extravagant banners here. Only discipline. These were veterans, men who had crossed mountains, deserts, and rivers under one leader. They had faced Persia before, and won. But today was different. Today, they faced the full weight of an empire. Some soldiers looked toward the Persian lines, a sea of enemies beyond counting. Others kept their eyes fixed forward. They trusted one man. And that man was already mounting his horse. There he stood. Alexander. Only 25 years old, yet already undefeated. He mounted his legendary black horse, Bucephalus, the animal no one else could tame. A horse as fearless as its rider. The red cloak flowed behind him in the desert wind. Bronze armor reflected the rising sun. He did not look at the size of the Persian army. He studied it. He calculated. He searched for weakness. To his men, he was not just a king, he was the first to charge and the last to retreat. He had crossed into Asia not merely to fight battles, but to conquer destiny, and in that moment, mounted on Bucephalus, staring across the vast plain, Alexander was not thinking about survival. He was thinking about victory. Then came the unexpected move. Instead of charging straight ahead, Alexander shifted his entire army sideways. A diagonal advance. Slow. Deliberate. Controlled. The Macedonian line moved at an angle, drifting toward the Persian flank. Confusion rippled through the Persian ranks. Darius had prepared for a direct assault. But this was something else. As Alexander moved right, Persian cavalry followed, stretching their own lines thinner and thinner. And that was the trap. Alexander was not retreating. He was pulling the Persian army out of position, creating a gap in the center, a gap that only he had seen. The battlefield was no longer about numbers. It was about precision. About timing. About a single decisive strike. And soon, Alexander would ride directly into the heart of the Persian Empire. Then it begins. From the Persian right flank, cavalry units surge forward. Thousands of horsemen thunder across the plain, armored riders, curved blades raised, war cries tearing through the morning air. The earth trembles beneath pounding hooves. Dust erupts in massive clouds. The sky itself seems to shake. Darius has made his move. If the Macedonian flank collapses, if fear spreads even for a moment, the smaller army will be surrounded and crushed. The cavalry crashes toward Alexander's lines like a tidal wave. Speed. Power. Impact. The battle has begun. But the Macedonians do not break. Instead, shields lock. Bronze against bronze. The phalanx lowers its sarissas, long spears forming a deadly forest of steel points. They do not shout wildly. They do not scatter. They brace. As Persian riders slam into the spear wall, horses rear and stumble. Riders are thrown. The formation holds firm, disciplined, unshaken. Arrows rain down from above. Spears strike forward in unison. The strength of the Macedonian army is not numbers. It is unity. Each man trusts the one beside him. And together, they become an unbreakable machine. Then Darius unleashes his shock weapon. Scythed chariots charge. Blades spin from the wheels, flashing in the sunlight as horses gallop at full speed. They are designed to cut through infantry, to rip open formations, to turn order into chaos. The ground roars beneath them. For a heartbeat, the Macedonian line seems vulnerable. But Alexander had prepared for this. At the last possible second, the phalanx opens narrow gaps. The chariots rush through, trapped between lines instead of breaking them. Spearmen attack the horses from the sides. Drivers are dragged down. The unstoppable weapon has been neutralized. What was meant to terrify becomes a failure. And now, Persian confidence begins to crack. Now the battlefield dissolves into brutal close combat. Swords clash. Shields splinter. Men scream. Dust blinds the eyes. Sweat and blood mix on bronze armor. There is no grand formation here, only survival. Macedonian infantry push forward step by step. Persian soldiers fight desperately to hold their ground. The noise is overwhelming, metal striking metal, horses shrieking, commanders shouting over the chaos. This is no longer a display of power. It is a struggle of endurance. And somewhere within this storm of violence, Alexander is watching. Waiting. Searching for the moment. And then, it happens. Because the Persian cavalry followed Alexander's diagonal movement earlier, their lines have stretched too far. In the center, space appears. A weakness. A gap. At first, it is small, barely noticeable. But Alexander sees it instantly. Where others see chaos, he sees opportunity. The Persian center is no longer solid. It is exposed. And behind that thinning line stands Darius. This is the moment Alexander has engineered from the very beginning. Not to fight the entire army, but to strike the heart. And now, he prepares to ride. Alexander sees the gap. There is no hesitation. He lowers his spear. And with a thunderous command, he leads the Companion Cavalry forward. Not in a scattered charge, but in a tight wedge formation. A human spearhead. Horses surge as one. Bronze armor flashes beneath the sun. Dust explodes behind them. At the very tip of the wedge rides Alexander himself. Not behind his men. Not protected. At the front. They drive straight into the exposed Persian center, slicing through weakened lines. Persian infantry scramble to close ranks, too late. The wedge punches deeper. Closer, toward the royal chariot. Alexander is no longer fighting the army. He is hunting the king. From his elevated chariot, Darius III sees it unfolding. The gap widening. The Macedonian cavalry breaking through. And at their head, Alexander. The distance between them shrinks rapidly. Advisors shout. Horses panic. Dust blinds the air. For a moment, the fate of an empire balances on a single decision. Stand, and risk capture. Or flee, and survive. Darius chooses survival. He turns his chariot. The King of Kings retreats from the battlefield. And when the Persian soldiers see their ruler fleeing, confidence collapses. What was once the largest army on earth begins to crumble into chaos, not because every soldier was defeated, but because their king had abandoned the field. As the sun lowers over Gaugamela, the battlefield falls silent. Broken chariots lie scattered across the plain. Abandoned shields and fallen banners mark where formations once stood. In the distance, remnants of the Persian army retreat into fading light. And on a small rise overlooking the field, stands Alexander. Dust-covered. Victorious. At just 25 years old, He has shattered the power of the Persian Empire. Babylon will open its gates to him. Persepolis will fall. And the ancient world will never be the same. This was more than a battle. It was the end of one empire, and the birth of another. From this day forward, Alexander is no longer merely king of Macedon. He is ruler of Asia. And history will remember Gaugamela as the moment a young conqueror became legend.